Wanda, you good?
Yep.
Okay. We're gonna do some, so if you have a number, that means that you're in a small group. And we're gonna do some small group conversations tonight. Oh, yes, I did say I was gonna get started, and I did not remember to tell you I was gonna get started. So I have some note takers, some helpful folks who work with me. They're on the Zoom right here. We're gonna try this out as a technology. It may or may not work for us. And then for the folks who could not make it, are you live streaming on Facebook? Just for folks who want to hear and see what's happening, so we can give people as much opportunity to be present as possible. And I think Rhonda is as well. So there's lots of access for lots of folks. We have been thematically talking about around three major things at our last 3 meetings. We have 3 meetings so far, and 3 themes have been sort of the focus of these meetings. And let me stop. Most of the faces I know, but in case you don't know me, I'm Kia. I don't think we've met yet, have we?
Probably not. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your
Kia,
name.
I'm Kia.
Tia.
K with a K. Great. I think everybody else is a very familiar face. And
I'm Petra.
Ezra.
Petra.
Petra, see? I can hear tonight. We're on the same page
I got
tonight.
my hearing aids in.
I don't. And so I have no excuse. None.
I'm gonna turn them up.
Gotcha. The 3 things that we've been mainly focusing on have been the homes that are in need of repair due to crumbling foundations and sinking foundations. Last meeting, we did not have enough time to really have our conversation necessary or needed for the arts center and the remediation of that property. And then the things happening on particular streets around traffic calming, around the dark streets, like it's dark on this street. And I was like, huh.
And it's a bus stop.
Is that a
Bus
bus
stop
stop?
right there.
That's like, how did this dark parking lot I'm turning into tonight? Speeding and two-way, so, so what we're generally calling traffic calming, there could be a different name for it, but that's sort of the catch-all. And so, given that those are the 3 areas, and I'm certain there are other things that we've really been focusing on for the last 2 or 3 meetings, we decided to really have some small group conversations in these areas. And you got assigned a number when you came in, you picked a number when you came in, and it doesn't have to be your number, but we wanted to sort of start to set the organization of it. Group 1 is going to really talk about houses. So if you don't have group 1 and you want group 1, you want to talk about houses, you are welcome to switch the group. Group 2, we're going to talk about the arts and community center, and then group 3 is going to talk about I think I have the numbers right. Yes, that's right. Traffic crime. I just want to make sure I wasn't in the numbers. And 3 is going to talk about streetlights and traffic crime. And you'll have someone at each table from the launch team and from the town to sort of help us talk through these things. There's some questions that we've heard you ask, that we'll ask again, and we'll have it in a smaller group conversation. And then there are some invitations for helping us to think creatively about ways we can approach the responses that may be long time coming, that we may not have thought of, that maybe you've been saying for 5 years, nobody's heard you. Well, we're going to be in a small group, and it's really easier to hear folks when we're in a conversation. So that's what I want to say about that. I have a few updates on our end. I said it at our last meeting that this community engagement work, we have a website for it. It's called southend@launch.com, right? Y'all, that's what it's called. I'll have it up again for the end of the meeting. The PowerPoint slides and video recordings from our previous meetings are up on that website. If folks are just interested in going back to looking at what we said, you can access that information. We will continue to populate it with content that is relevant to this work. If there is content that you believe should be on it, when you take a look at it, let us know and like, hey, we would really love to see updates about this, and we would really love to know some historical information about this. And then we will populate that website with content that's going to be useful for those who are able to come to the meetings or interested, for those who are not, they want to be interested later. For those who are just learning about the course of this work, they will have access to that information. There's also, some social media, but social media is not for everybody, but it does help us to track how we're getting information out. It does help us to track who's accessing it. It does help us to document some of what's happening or some of what we're hoping to happen. And so those sites are up too, and you can access those from the website as well. I have a couple more announcements, but I want to save those to the end of the meeting. Before we move into our small groups, I want to, and most of y'all met Ayana last meeting, who is the economic and community director for the town of Hamden, and she has some information she wants to share about the CDBG and Dixville Corridor project that I want to give her opportunity to share with you all.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Ayana Wagner. I'm the Economic and Community Development Director for the town of Hamden. I've been here for about a month. So I wanted to start with a couple of announcements or reminders. So you may or may not have heard that we are doing a survey. It's called CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant. It's federal funding that the town gets to use for things like affordable housing and economic development. In order to receive the funding, every 5 years there's what's called a consolidated plan that needs to be put together. And part of that is community input on what you would like to see in your town for this money to go to that use for affordable housing and economic development. So the survey is for community members to complete to be able to provide that input. And that we are working with the consultant as a part of putting together this plan and report that we have to do in order to receive the funds. And so it's very important that as many members of the community as possible complete the survey so that we can hear your input. We're coming off of a 5-year plan. So 5 years ago, there was community outreach done at that time. The funding went towards different programs that CDBG allows. And now we're entering another 5-year period. So we have printouts. There's also a QR code if anybody wants to do it electronically. It is easier for the consultant to be able to consolidate the information, but feel free to do it the paper version. And so I'm going to leave this on the table. There are a number of copies here in order to do that. I also wanted to, in case there is any confusion, which I've heard a bit about, there are a number of different surveys. I keep hearing the word surveys or big. Okay, so as clearly as I possibly can, I'm going to try to distinguish what's going on. So again, CDBG is funding from the federal government, mostly for economic development and affordable housing. We're working with a consultant, and we need your input and the survey will sort of walk you through questions about what you want to see. That's one survey that we have going on for one project. Then you may have heard about an organization called Save the Sound, and they are working on a visioning for the Six Lakes project, and they're a nonprofit that is focused on helping to work on the remediation issues around that part of town and ideas for what should happen there. They also have a survey out. And so I don't have that survey. There is a website called Save the Sound. I believe the website has that survey. So also feel free to complete that. And then separately, there is a survey by Haley and Aldrich for if you believe that you have crumbling foundations, to complete the survey so that they know to call you to make an appointment for an assessment to assess the damage and make a report about then getting you assistance for your foundation, for your home. Does anybody have any questions about those 3 different and distinct projects that are going on and the outreach for input if all those are relevant to you, except if you, unless you don't have a home that has crumbling foundations.
I just want to clarify the first survey that you're running.
Yeah.
That's for the HUD
Yes.
block grant.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. It's the HUD program.
Is that the block grant I've heard about? It's like $10 million.
It's more than $10 million. It's something different. I don't actually know what the town typically gets in CDBG funding, but I'm pretty sure it's more than $10 million.
I think it's less than that.
It's way less.
Yeah.
It's like 400.
It's like $500,000.
500,000.
Yeah, it scales the population, so like
Okay.
ours is much lower
Sorry,
than,
I'm
yeah.
still in my
Yeah.
New York City mentality.
Yeah.
No.
Not
Not even close.
Is that grant going to survive despite the change in
Oh, good Lord, who
administration?
knows? I mean, if you know.
I will not take that manifest.
We-
I mean, it would be highly unusual and unprecedented for it not to continue, but I actually have no way of knowing. I think if anybody in this room does.
So it's been like passed until on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a, yes, many, and I should say, many communities of all demographics and all political persuasions receive this money. You know, rural America receives this money. This is a pretty crucial source of funding.
Is there going to be a survey on the community center circulated at any point?
So tomorrow, the community center design workshop is happening, and I think that is really meant to be a live survey and feedback session. I don't know that there. Go ahead.
Yes, we will circulate one after
Oh,
tomorrow's event, though.
okay.
Or like a link, a QR code or something like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll share it through the town social media. We'll take the team that put that together and develop some of the questions that they are putting together for tomorrow night and incorporate that into the survey so that goes out with a link, so it's consistent with what we do tomorrow.
Okay.
So, you know, I would also really ask for your help with your neighbors to spread the word about the various surveys. You know, really, as much input as possible is only going to be for the better in terms of the outcome, and it should be reflective of what the community wants. So, I'm then now going to ask Stephen to join me, or you don't necessarily physically come up here, but I also wanted to introduce or discuss the topic of another source of funding is something called the SIF grant, which is a state grant, and there are rounds twice a year where municipalities apply for funding for different projects. These are competitive sources of funding, so it's a competition. You have to put in a proposal, and you know, for something that you feel like is important and you want to see for housing or for economic development. There are a whole category of things. So this is round 6 that is coming up, and we have a pretty exciting proposal, which I would like you to try to think of in the context of everything else that we're discussing with regard to southern Hamden. So it is essentially the idea of it is to try to start the engine of incentivizing development and attracting folks to come into southern Hamden along the Dixwell corridor. So Dixwell Avenue corridor. So it extends to New Haven, or from New Haven up to Hamden. There's a bus rapid transit, and we're trying to sort of build off of that by creating connectivity and better streetscape improvements and some other technical things that Stephen will talk about. And the idea is sort of to lay the groundwork to try to attract and incentivize some of the great stuff we've seen happening in New Haven to kind of move on up this way for the betterment of growth for our small businesses, for for economic development, for restaurants, for housing development, for all the things that I believe the community wants to see in terms of activation and vitality and real growth in this area. So we're currently in the planning stages of putting this grant together. The application is due in December, so we do kind of need to move at some pace. But the proposal is really, the experts in economic development and engineering and planning within your town government that are envisioning sort of putting this application together based on also what we know of what the state wants to see. I mean, the state really wants to see economic development. They want to see housing. They have certain priorities that they are willing to fund. And sort of taking that and what we've seen be awarded in the past, that is all of those, and the needs of the town, that is kind of how we come up with this proposal. Again, the idea is really to start to lay the foundation for putting Hamden more on the map to attract development and to foster small business growth, continued small business growth and retention in southern Hamden.
Yeah, so I'll just add that we've been working with the city of New Haven. This is a joint application between the two municipalities. So the project extends, starts at Putnam, Dixwell, goes down Dixwell to Bassett and Dixwell. So it kind of spans equally the border of the town. And the thought is to develop a streetscape palette that shows some consistency, so you develop a sense of place and community within that corridor. We're primarily piggybacking on what Ayana said is a bus rapid transit. This is a project that's, it's at 30% conceptual design. This is just the stage and design where the towns and the state have demonstrated conceptual feasibility, and now once we get through this part, our next step is to start bringing it out into public meetings like this. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're also cognizant of the fact that we're trying to make this more successful by building up and making it easier to connect to that major transit project. So a large part of the project is the streetscape, because we're trying to drive more transit-oriented development within the corridor, but we also want to make sure it's safe and easier for people to get from the outlying communities of Dixwell kind of over to Dixwell, so that like you can walk safely, you can bike safely to the bus and take that single seat down and then hit Amtrak at the State Street station and be in New York in 2 train rides. So part of that also is realizing that the Canal Trail is a kind of awesome bike transit in town and in New Haven and in further north, but we wanted to stitch the two together, so make the connections more safer for pedestrians and cyclists to move between the two. We also wanted to try and connect major elements, and right now we've identified Goodrich Street and Arch, so Route 10 as it goes west over to southern Connecticut, and then Goodrich as it goes east towards Albertus, and then we were developing sidewalk connections about where Keith is, I think at Whiting Street, across an existing right-of-way, the Canal Trail, Hamden Industrial Park, and connecting down into this neighborhood through the existing Old Middle Street property, which is soon to be the community center area.
And so we are in the process of putting the grant together, so I'm sorry that we don't have graphics, because that, like, you can tell he's an engineer, because he's like doing this with his hands and mapping it out, but we just are still in the process of actually putting it together, so we don't have graphics of what exactly, but if you could try to imagine that that's what he described is what we're trying to work on. And again, I just want to emphasize, the state has certain priorities that they will fund, and so transit-oriented development, housing around transit-oriented development, streetscapes improvements and safety around walkability and pedestrian right-of-way, lighting, those sorts of things are, they want to kind of see those things in place to be able to build off of that. So that is part of what is going into the idea of this grant application.
Yeah, it's the lighting is an important part. I did forget to mention we wanted to redo the lighting on Dixwell, give it dark skies compliant fixtures and make it a consistent look throughout the corridor, and then establish lighting on the Canal Trail so that there's lighting to hopefully improve safety on the Canal Trail itself. Right now that starts at Treadwell and goes south to Munson, but tries to do an equal span within both New Haven and Hamden. That's a lot.
So the only, just the ask, I guess, is at this stage of sort of conceptually what we've described, do you have any questions or comments about why is this important, or what is the purpose of this?
Yes, why is it important and what is the purpose?
It's important to try to lay a foundation for activating this area towards that development. So any community needs to have use this access to attract investors, development, all the things that kind of go into creating more economic activity. Often it's transit-oriented development, which is, you have a major train station bus hub. It's walkable if, to the neighboring area, so you want to build more housing, because then it makes it easier for people to not have to get into a car. You can reduce the parking in the neighborhood. And so a lot of communities are now funding housing and economic development around a train station. Hamden does not have a train station. However, there's this bus rapid transit system, which is one way of getting people to go up and down between New Haven and Hamden. And so that is something that we can use as an anchor for, and it's on a major, Dixwell Avenue is a major corridor. So that's an anchor that we can use. And honestly, there's from Dixwell, a lot of connectivity to the universities, to the restaurants, to what's already existing. So it's important because we want to demonstrate to the community and to outside folks who want to be coming to Hamden to shop and dine and hang out and use the amazing recreation that we are investing. And the state wants to see that.
That's great, but I just want to find out, is the town have any plan to bring any significant commerce down here to the south end? Because that's really what the south end has lost. I don't think we have much of that down here.
So,
Any significant employers?
I mean, part of that is an offshoot of laying the groundwork that we're describing. And I know it might sound like kind of crazy that, okay, streetscape improvement and lighting and, helping to sort of beautify and create these sort of safety mechanisms would help drive business and commerce, but it actually does work that way. Investors want to see, commerce business wants to see that the town is making investments and making the place a place where people want to live and work. And part of the way you do that is to improve your transit, to create walkability, and to drive some vitality around areas where you want to develop. So it is a multi-step process, but it is an important first step. Not a lot of businesses or residents want to invest in a place that, and come to some place new and put their money in if they don't see that the town or the state is also making these investments.
Bottom line, make it easier for people to get around and safer. And it get people out of their cars. And then get someone feeling safe walking around. Foot traffic is more important than car traffic. You get more people walking than riding on the road. My whole soapbox that I can stand on is traffic calming and making it the optimal amount of frustration to drive around in a car, because when you do that, it makes people slow down and then just feel safer when you're walking. So safer to get around and safer and easier to get around through bus, bike, and walking.
Any other questions or comments or? So that's sort of it at this moment. I just wanted to, sort of inform you about some other really exciting things that are going on. I have seen it in my, experience that when you make these kind of investments, when you go again to apply, we're always going to be applying for any sources of funding that we think can make a difference in a positive way for the community. And so when you win an award like that and you show that you can implement the program, it does make it easier for you to apply for additional funding for more, whether it's infrastructure or housing or those sort of things. It is important to compete in these rounds of funding.
And we do plan to have an actual meeting focused on this. It would jointly be between New Haven and Hamden, so we haven't firmly identified the location yet. I think we were looking at Q House, but we haven't firmed it down. But we'll distribute that through Kia's team when we do get that set up and make sure that that's distributed as best we can.
Yeah, and I would also just say back to the commerce question, it's not necessarily that you have to sort of wait for the grant and then the implementation and the construction before you go out to businesses. Actually, getting an award like this creates a ton of press, and you build off of that by then reaching out to businesses, developers, and saying, look what we're doing. they need some leeway, right? So they start to see that stuff is going on and that the state has, granted, it's a kind of awesome seal of approval that the town is doing something significant to award, millions of dollars to do a project like this. And that gets out to the development community and we start to say, hey, come take a look, this is what it's gonna look like. Here, by the way, here are some, parcels where you could think about building your business or, all these things sort of happen in tandem. We're not like waiting, but it does help kind of have these conversations. All right, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. I think that we'll add that to our content that we can update folks about as they're and begin to take feedback on however you're looking at feedback in terms of to collect that. I wanna name a couple of things before we start in small groups. There's and Ayana said it, right? There's so many surveys going around. And they are three. Oh, there's three. Okay, there's three. I overemphasize so many. There's 3 surveys happening, and they are asking about really important things and very different things that impact you in different ways. And so I know it asks a lot of your time to complete those surveys, but as much as you want to be a part of, what some of the outcomes are, or at least have what you want to contribute be considered, then the cleaning of those surveys are really important. I know that we've been using these meetings primarily as ways to share information. We've been trying to make it reciprocal, and a lot of it has been going. Sometimes it feels like it's just going one direction. So tonight we want to be able to be in conversation. I want to say that we were thinking about doing a survey, but we're decided not to do a survey. We're not going to add a 4th survey to you all. But what we would like to invite you to, and we want to talk to you a little bit about it when the meeting ends, is 2 things. We're going to set up in community over the next couple of months to do what we're calling community office hours. Right now, we're looking at heat centers, and we're looking at Barbara's, and if you guys have other locations where you think it's really good to set up for 2 or 3 hour spans to be available to talk with you, to answer questions, to walk you through a survey that you might be having a hard time, and to hear more about what we don't get a chance to hear in these meetings. We would love you to tell us where we should set up. And so we'll come with our notebooks, we'll come with our laptops, we'll sit down, we'll buy you some coffee, and we'll just be around for 2 or 3 hours a couple of times over the course of the month to just be available for conversation and for listening. In addition to that, we are asking folks if they would be interested in doing what we're calling resident interviews with us. And so they are one-on-one interviews where we're gonna be able to just hear one-on-one your story, hear one-on-one your needs, hear one-on-one your requests. They will be integrated into what we are creating as a part of this community engagement process, which is a community plan. One of the results or outcomes of this is to create a community plan, which is like a strategic plan for a community. There is data that says here are the things that are impacting the residents and neighbors of South Hamden. Here are the ways in which we are currently working towards addressing those things. Here are the ways in which we can partnership. Here are some ideas we didn't think about before. Here are some of the boundaries and challenges that we're experiencing. But it's meant to be a document that reflects all the voices, both the town's leadership voice, the residents' voice, and specifically address some of the areas that we've been talking about. So those interviews, those office hours, these meetings, some of the door knocking, all of those are meant to be informed connection so that we can inform this community plan and that your voices are being heard and being represented in this plan that the town is wanting to create. So I want to say that. I want to say we can talk more about that when we close out the meeting. But we would love to now spend some more one-on-one time with folks, with you, with your neighbors, with your friends who live across the street or 2 streets down, and begin to shift and pivot the way we are holding these meetings so that we can begin to move toward what can we create and what can we do together, and what else do we need to hear that we haven't had the opportunity to ask yet in these settings. Before we move along, I just want to say, can I just say hi to you, Elder Carr? Just say this is Elder Carr, who's an elder here at Great Future, who opened up their space to us. So we just want to say thank you and acknowledge you. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's have a conversation where I'm not standing in front of the room, where Ayana's not standing in front of the room, and we're sort of talking at you. Let's talk talk to each other. And so you got a card when you came into the room, and if you haven't gotten a card, don't worry about it, we're gonna assign you to a group. So group one, if you have card number one, in order, this is an issue that is clearly interested to you, is we're gonna talk about houses and foundations in this group. Our engineer partners, Leah and Chris from Haley and Aldrich are at the table. Ife is at the table. I know she's been doing some of the home visits. She's been working on some of the assessments with them. And we have some questions and some prompts that we want to offer and be able to have a dialogue with one another in this area for group one. Group two, you want to talk about in advance of the meeting tomorrow, more information, as much as I have to give you, but at least I can collect questions and sort of offer some other perspectives about the Arts and Community Center, the remediation of that space. We're going to talk about that in this area in group two. Group three, we're going to talk about, I'm about to call you Michelle, your name is not Michelle, Mary and Steven are going to talk about traffic stuff, traffic calming, dark streets, and speeding and other issues that are relevant to those areas. And so if that is the thing that you want to really talk about and get more information on and contribute to, you want to ask that you be in this area with them. And so I'm gonna pause and make sure you're in the right space to have the right conversation. We'll give you some time to move, and then your group facilitators will start. Yes. Oh, thank you. So there are prompts. Got it.
It's here, right?
No, I'm.
Oh.
You gotta do it, turn around.
Oh, I didn't see that.